Okay, everybody. We're going to get started here in about another minute. Before I introduce our speaker, I wanted to take a moment to say welcome and to let you know who I am. My name is Kelly Etzel, and I am the online speech and debate coordinator for NSDA. And I'm really excited to have you here. This is going to be our last Springboard Educational Series webinar for this month, but we've had such good attendance, and I think this has been such a great series, and I'm excited about the resources that this is creating for coaches, judges, advisors, students, anyone to be able to use in the future. So we'll definitely be picking this back up. And if you have suggestions for me or have topics that you'd like to see us cover, please send me a message or shoot me an email or write something in the chat. Just so you know, I'm going to have the presenter, Bill Harris, go through the presentation and we'll answer your questions at the end. But if something comes up that you're thinking about, please go ahead and post it in the Q&A. Or if you're more comfortable using the chat feature, you can do that as well. I'll check both throughout the presentation, and we'll read the questions one by one to Bill at the end so that they can get answered. And of course, if anything comes up at any time, just go ahead and type it in there. All right, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker. So William, or Bill Harris, is the coach of the speech and debate program at Grand Rapids City Middle High School, where he works with both middle school and high school students in both debate and in individual events. Each year, Bill's program connects with between 30 to 50 students. His coaching career began in 1998 as a parent volunteer, and then for 10 years as an assistant coach. And in 2010, he became the coach for the program. He received his first diamond from the NSDA in 2016. He's coached 5 academic All-Americans and has had students compete at nationals in U.S. extemp, policy, dramatic interpretation, oratory, and congressional debate. As a coach, he brings a background in marketing, communications, and politics, coupled with graduate degrees in business and religion. Bill has also taught speech at the collegiate level for 4 years and served on state level committees for middle school forensics and presently for debate. Away from speech and debate, he loves poetry, music, and whatever sport or concert his students are performing in. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to Bill Harris.
Welcome. I'm glad that we're going to be talking today, and we're going to talk about Pro-Con, and we're going to go to the slideshow just in a minute. But first, also here with us is Chen, and Aaron is the national champion in Pro-Con from last year. He is a junior this year at City High School in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And Aaron, among other things, is the second chair cellist for the Youth Symphony. Aaron is the president of the National Honor Society at school, and I will let him describe anything else that he wants to say about himself, but what makes his life special. There are a lot of things that we could talk about here, but Aaron, you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Harris. I think you covered all the big things. Currently, I am just a junior at City, trying to get through my my studies and also making sense of how the college admissions process is going to go next year. More presently, I just got back from a dentist appointment, got 2 teeth drilled in, and have a really numb mouth. So, right the perfect time to speak about public address and whatnot. But I digress.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you. So we're gonna kick this thing off. I've got a slideshow that covers just about everything that I can possibly think about with Pro-Con. There is a text that goes with this one, and so you can in the chat drop your email if you'd like the full just written text. That'll be available too. So let's go take a look at what we've got here. Okay, and He pulls it up. There we go, right there. There we are. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, the presentation's in like, this presentation is in like 3 parts. What to, we'll talk about it, sort of like what the basics are of pro-con, preparation, and then we'll look at the performance side of it, structure of speeches, technical details, and some of those I'm sure Aaron will want to pop in and talk about. So there we go, like that. Okay, so for me, the big picture, I'm putting you all up at the top. Okay, big picture. Pro-con is an exercise in citizenship. Even though we think of it as a speech event, underneath it, what we're doing is we're doing something. There's a big picture that we are part of, and why we might want to keep pursuing this. And oops, a daisy. I want to go backward. So the idea is that basically we live in an era of silos, of polarization. Pro-con by its asks us to sort of step outside of that siloization. At its heart, it's the ability to see and hear others. It takes intellectual empathy. That's a theme that I think as I prepared this, I was especially mindful of, that we are practicing and cultivating the idea of empathy, of understanding, listening to other sides other than just what is sort of native to our own. You can see, I hope, as we walk through that a pro-con challenge is something that could also be easily adapted to other kinds of educational settings. We don't have to. I'm moving my camera so I can talk so I can look at my screen, my screen right here while we're talking. Pro-con is a practice that we could take over into civics classes or into other kinds of non-speech places. That's where we are. So the big picture is it's intellectual empathy. It's a way of building our civic life together, fundamentally. Now, we're going to look, now we have to talk about the structure. We'll look at, so what is it? What kind of students should you be, if you're recruiting for pro-con or thinking about people who might be good at it, what or who do you look for? And then we'll pay attention to that always useful question of audience analysis. So here are the basics. In pro-con, the speaker or the student gives 2 sides of a debate topic. And those debate topics are drawn from, at the national level, they're drawn from the topics that will be relevant at the National Speech and Debate Association tournament coming up here in June. Those speeches, you give 2 sides. Each side or speech is one side pro, one side con, and the time limits are 3 to 5 minutes for each side. And so that's a total time of 10 minutes or so, given maybe 30 seconds of overrun, as we do in NSDA. The speeches, the key thing here is just perhaps a relief for students is that speeches are presented from notes. They aren't memorized, so that's a good thing. And just generally what do judges look for? They're going to look for organization, analysis, delivery. The analysis part probably has the most thematic elements to it, and so that's where we want to take a closer look at. Moving on. And the first time you hear about pro-con, your reaction may have been like mine, saying, boy, that sure sounds like public forum, doesn't it? The speeches are the same length, 5 minutes. They but then they start differing. Pro-con speeches are presented back to back, the pro and the con. In public forum, the pro and the con side would be presented separately. And generally it depends on the coin flip. In pro-con, we use a declarative mood. That is, it's a neutral mood about how we present the materials. When we present a side in public forum, we're already thinking strategically about how we set up the rest of the debate. What are the points, trying to anticipate counter arguments and the like. In pro-con, that second speech is not a strategic rebuttal. In public forum, after the first speech, the second speech always has this kind of rebuttal, mixes rebuttal of the first speech along with a kind of constructive or a constructive speech. So it's a mixture. That doesn't happen in pro-con. And finally, in pro-con, the speaker asks for consideration by a judge. And that's similar to extemp. In extemp, we don't say, you have to believe it my way, but you lay out the idea in a way that the judge or the audience would sort of nod their head and agree with you. When we debate, we do something more. We ask for a decision. And so typically we will have this. So typically we have the situation where you will say, judge, based on this, you should vote for us. And it's a more direct speech to the judge asking for a decision. So we can see that pro-con is going to be in this more neutral space rather than in this more clash-oriented space where public forum is. Moving on. Okay, so what kind of students do pro-con? That's your basic idea. And the obvious pool that we look for, people who understand the idea of considering opposing ideas, that will be our world of debate. Okay, but the pool is a lot bigger than just the debate pool. So there are three places where I might suggest you might look at. Okay, first off is look at the Model UN people. In Model UN, to be successful in Model UN, you have to put on the hat of as if. Because in Model UN, what we're doing is we're looking at, we're collecting information, and then we have to put on a hat, a role. And that hat or role, that's really empathy. That's what we look at. Can I get this up here? Come on, no, you're not going to do it. Okay, come on. Okay, so that's so we have empathy going on there, and so your Model UN people will have many of the same skill sets that you would like in pro-con. They're used to speaking, they're used to doing the research. They are able to also put on a role to take on the different aspects that are sometimes asked for in a content in pro-con. A second place to look at are students who do original oratory. That again, the actions of the requirements that you need to be successful at oratory, you want to have an openness to the ideas, you want to be spelling it out, you want to have it, you want to be able to do research, so that kind of breadth or that capaciousness that we have, that idea also, that's kind of the seedbed for a lot of really good work in pro-con. Students who are able to think widely are going to find the ideas in pro-con useful. A third area, and maybe it's only our experience at City, is to look at the interp people, dramatic interp here in this case. And again, that's because in interp, what we do is, in dramatic interp, what we do is we have to listen and we have to enter into the character that we're talking about. That kind of empathy. And again, if the concept of pro-con fundamentally is this kind of developing this intellectual empathy, then the students who have a capacity for that oftentimes can cross over. Because, and I should, which is as I put here in the footnote, at City we don't, because we're a small school. I mean, I touch, yes, 50 students over the year, but but oftentimes the students are sort of moving from one group to the other. And so kids will do both debate and also maybe may do actually performative stuff. So I have debaters who are doing DI, debaters who are doing poetry this year. So I would say, looking at, there are these other pools that you can look at that you can be creative with, that you may want to think about as we move along with pro-con. Now, who are we talking to? Just bear with me 1 second. This light here, I think, is driving me crazy. Yeah, that looks better. Okay. Now I'm not as shallow. Okay, so our audience analysis. Who is the audience in pro-con? And that's one of the things we want to pay attention to. It takes place at all sorts of, and here with the audience, imaginatively, your audience is going to be a general informed public. That's similar to the public forum audience, basically. It's not, in other words, it's not as philosophical as some, you don't have to assume people who have technical grounding in a particular field. Practically, and so I guess the reason why I say imaginatively is because that's how because as your student writes the speech, they're writing for a listener of some sort, and this is sort of the target zone, the target landing zone. Now, practically, what happens is that there'll be a speech and debate judge, because these speeches typically have been presented at national tournaments or perhaps on the springboard. And for that, then just want to assume that they are informed. They may have coached debate. I wouldn't take that for granted at all. And again, that knowing that you have a general audience then creates certain kinds of impacts, as you can see. It means that you have to be wary about using technical terms. Sometimes the debate topic will invite a sort of kind of technical analysis or the use of acronyms. You want to be careful of those. You got to be careful about the verbal shortcuts that we might use if you come out of, particularly if you came out of public forum. There are shortcuts in Lincoln Douglas. Certainly we do all kinds of verbal shortcuts when we do policy. And then the general rule, if you want just a general rule of thumb about about your audience, remember that you only have 5 minutes. So you can only present information that fits into that 5-minute block. You don't have 8 minutes to present your constructive case like you would in policy. You won't have another round after this. It's 5 minutes and it's done. So remember that will also sort of simplify and concentrate your presentation. Let's go. Okay, so now we got to talk about picking the topics, the Goldilocks principle, and then research. And here I think Aaron probably is going to have some things he may want to contribute. Okay, so I imagine it this way. There are 3 doors to the potential topic for your pro-con speech. One is sort of the classic Lincoln Douglas public forum door. The second door is going to be the congressional docket. And then the third door is going to be policy. So we're going to take a look at each of these individually. Lincoln Douglas and the public forum are sort of prepackaged because those resolutions typically are written in a way that allows for a pro and for an easy division between pro and con on the topic. That's the online. And with them, this is another practical matter, there's lots of online research available about those major topics. The difference between them, for those who aren't familiar, Lincoln Douglas tends to be a more philosophic approach. The public policy will generally the public forum will deal with some sort of policy issue, though policy in a very broad sense, but in the public sphere. And for students, because you want to say, well, which one do we want to look at? That will depend on your student's temperament. Some students like to think in philosophy. Philosophy principles are really the thing that motivates them and what gets them going. Others like to consider more the practical policy orientations. Now, I am going to put a little snark in here. In my own notes, I put a footnote to the idea that resolutions are written with an eye to two sides. Yes, they sometimes are, and at the national, I hope they are. However, in the regular season, as you may have discovered periodically, public forum issues sometimes can be really off balance. Yeah, they sometimes have been lopsided. They have been sometimes invite a real technical way of thinking. One famous one that I like, we debated last year was about urbanization in West Africa. I will not go into it. I'll just simply say that was one that was really quite difficult for students to get their hands around in a concrete way. So sometimes these topics are going to be too broad or have a kind of funny twist to them. And in that case, then you will go off and we'll look for something else. Moving on to our, let's move. Yeah, and so the second place is to look at the congressional debate docket. Okay, and this is again, the congressional debate docket. There'll be perhaps 30 potential topics to pick from. There's a lot. It's quite varied. Generally, the topic areas, though, are going to be narrower than what you find in Lincoln Douglas or public forum, more specific. And that kind of smaller, more narrow focus is going to be, might make the most sense if you have young students. Okay, if you're dealing students who don't come out of debate. So again, think of your Model UN student, or perhaps your interp student who wants to try this. The congressional docket issues they're going to find things there that are going to be more specific and for them more graspable, more readily open for research. Now, if you aren't familiar with the congressional debate and how the topics are structured, here are a couple of ways. There are two things you need to know about them. One is they come in two flavors. The items are going to be either expressed as written out as a resolution, or they're going to be written out as a bill. And resolutions have their own resolutions. Advocate for that something should happen. They are basically a statement of opinion. And you can find, and when you look at so it has a series of whereas clauses. And I have this wrong. There'll be I have this wrong, and I have to change it before I put this up for final. Resolutions have a series of whereas clauses, and then the final clause will say, therefore be it resolved. Okay, and that's where, and that be it resolved clause is where the wording is that you would build off of for a pro-con speech. Now, bills, on the other hand, are written so that they are mandating some action by the federal government. And there, the first section or paragraph of the bill tells you what the bill is about and what should be done. I am just embarrassed that I have this thing wrong with the whereas clause, because you want to really look at that, let it be resolved. I will fix this. Moving on. Okay, so we've looked at Lincoln Douglas and public forum. We have looked at the breadth of possibilities that are on the congressional docket. And a third door one that I want to be I would personally be cautious about is looking at the policy or cross-ex debate resolution. The resolution itself, to make sense of this, you have, if you're unfamiliar with policy gives a large resolution. This year it is about, to the effect of, I'm doing this from memory, mind you, that resolve the United States federal government should substantially increase its spending on water resources, something to that effect. Okay, so it's about water resources, doing something substantially about that. So you have this really wide, expression of what the resolution is, and then the debaters will go in and they will develop specific cases or plans that would fit underneath that would fulfill that resolution. And so those potential plans or cases are what you would build your pro-con speech out of. It would change the wording somewhat, because at the beginning one would probably need to put a sentence in about this plan to rebuild the locks of the upper Mississippi fulfills the debate resolution. That something to that effect, just to introduce it. These plans or cases can be found in a number of places, but typically they have oftentimes been collected either on the debate wiki or at Open Evidence. I put the link here to Open Evidence. And that Open Evidence is a collection of cases and debate material developed at debate camps. And young and middle debaters like to use Open Evidence quite a bit. Again, once you have a plan or a case that you want to pursue, then you would develop the pro argument for that case, and then a con argument. What's wrong with this idea? The plan that you use in the plan text in policy debate is similar. The plan text is going to be simpler, but it's related to the bills that we found in congressional debate. There's a whole history there about how these two types of debate sort of evolve next to each other. Like I say, if the student isn't familiar with or isn't participating in policy debate, you may want to stay clear of this, because policy debate, the amount of information there is quite substantial. On the other hand, if you have a student who has done policy debate, the pro-con challenge actually could be a benefit. It helps them. In 5 minutes, they have to clarify what is their pro case. In 5 minutes, they have to clarify what's wrong with the pro case, what the con side is. If I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this also is a place where one could use a pro-con challenge approach, presenting both sides together as a kind of policy prep. Perhaps not the full 5 minutes, maybe ask them to give the pro side and the con side back to back in 2, 3 minute or 4 minute speeches. That would be another. So we can think about pro-con here as a teaching tool, as best suited perhaps as a teaching tool for policy, because of the technical nature of the issues that are involved in meeting the resolution in the cases, that there may be too much information to present efficiently in 5 minutes. That's kind of the give and go. But there are some really fun cases that come up in policy. I just want to say there are always fun cases there. Okay, so what makes a good topic? And here I think at this point, these are some ideas that Aaron and we had a conversation about this, and so I'm going to repeat more of his ideas than anything else. A good topic offers two interesting sides. So when we're looking at it, what makes a topic, you want to be able to illustrate it on, you don't want to have a direct clash saying yes and then explaining all the reasons why it's no. You want to think about them as how they relate to bigger stories. And so typically the one side will be relating to one kind of big story, and the other side, the con side, will relate to another aspect of that story. So they typically are, so these impacts are not the same. They're different, and part of the fun part of it is, for the listener, is trying to weigh which impact, how would you weigh the two impacts as they are being presented. Now, as you consider those larger stories, that will become, when we construct the speech, into the framework, into those opening comments that the speaker makes about relating what the issue, how to understand this issue in terms of its larger overall picture. Now, and then when we do this, and here, Aaron, you might want to step in and talk for a minute. We want to pay attention to your own, the student needs to pay attention to their own engagement. They want to look for something that they care about, because after all, delivery improves when you're committed. Do you want to say something here, Aaron? I want to bring you in because there you are. I'm just babbling away maniacally.
Of course. Sure, I can speak on that. One of the things that Procon Challenge really tries to, well, it's in the title of the competition, challenge you, is to find something that can make you engage within the argument itself. One of the issues that often comes up with the different forms of debate and even the other public address events and the individual events of NSDA is that sometimes the speaker isn't passionate about the topic itself, or rather is already so invested in one side of the argument politically or perhaps socially that they can't see the other side of the argument. This is going back to what Ms. Harris said with the silos. In that regard, I think it's very important, like it's outlined here, that Procon Challenge speakers find something that they truly care about, but do not only find one opinionated stance to stand with. For example, last summer when I took this at the national tournament as a supplemental event, the final topic I ended up using was the public forum resolution for the tournament, which was, quote, "In the United States, social media is beneficial for democratic values." For me, I was always interested with public communication, mass communication, and as well as just politics in general and how we view it as a society. And because of that, it was easier to speak about it because I was invested within it. I knew about it from the start because I did extemporaneous speaking throughout the season, and it was relatively something hot in the news. Unfortunately, that was around the time when we were dealing with repercussions here in the States over the January 6th and whatnot. But for me, I was also not too invested to the point where I could only inside argument. If you can find the recording online, I'm sure somewhere it's got it archived. But for my pro side of the argument, I argued specifically on how it closed gaps, builded bridges between communities, and allowed people to basically play a part in this giant global or national democracy that we have. And on my con side, I completely threw it out the window, went down a completely different route, and then negated the resolution by arguing something completely different about how it breeded a tribalistic culture where everybody only hears themselves. Because you speak about something that you care about as a Procon Challenge speaker, it makes everything easier because you already know how your arguments will play. Beyond that, if you're too invested, it just means that it gets harder to speak on the other side, with the one that you don't agree with too much.
Okay, Goldilocks. That's a, don't be too passionate. If you're too passionate, the sides aren't going to be balanced. If it's an if you aren't invested, so you're looking for something that we care about, but maybe not that much. It's sort of a balance that we have to move on here. There we go. Let's move on. Okay, now to do this, we're going to have to do research, and generally, it's like writing a research paper. That's the easiest, best way to think about this. again, this is why we pick orators to try this out, is because they're used to doing this kind of work. Once you have your topic, what do we do? Read. That's the best thing. Look for long form topic. Long form discussions is what you're looking for. You want to build up an understanding. Long form sources, typically these days, the New York Times provides lots of long form stuff. The Atlantic does. There are all kinds of Substacks. It's just, but we're looking for the long form that orient us. And then as you're doing it, you want to ask yourself the question, so why is this a question? What are the two sides that we're looking for? And what's the context for this question? So in other words, what's the nature of the issue? And then sort of like what's around it that might be proving interesting to talk about as well. Just be aware, young guns especially will just simply go to Google and say, the top hits on the first 2 pages, that's it. No, do not rip it off. You will want them to read and spend some time actually becoming knowledgeable about it. Now, where can we find? Now, if we're going to go deeper, the things we want to look for are going to get the articles that typically come out of academic publishing. Research articles, law review articles are a great source to look at. Where do we find this? There are a number of places. Some of the classics, the easy sources are going to be Google. Generally, Google. If you look at it and look at the number of people who recommend this article, that's a good clue that this is an important article. You can jump over to Google Scholar and see more there, and that comes in a variety of forms. Though you may run into paywalls, as we'll talk about it. You can explore JSTOR. This is a library of digital academic journals. I've used it a lot. There's just all kinds of fun stuff going on there. And as Aaron would tell you, he became an independent researcher account and he got 100 free articles a month. Okay, so these are the sources that you want to go deeper. You're looking, once you have an understanding of the side, then you want to go and think, what's underneath? What else can I say to it? How does this, what else can we do with it? The question is, when you're looking at these articles, they're often, they're hidden by paywalls. Okay. And there are 3 quick ways to get around this. One is just go to your library, the local library, perhaps a collegiate library. Like,
Has anybody else seen Mr. Harris freeze out? Yeah. Oh, hello.
oh, there I am. I'm back again. I'm sorry. My screen blew up. We will go. Let us return back to where we were, if we can. There. That's where we were. I was getting too excited. Okay, so I was saying that we can talk about interlibrary loans. The other way that we can go is just simply go to the author's website. If you know the author, you can go to their personal website, their faculty page, and authors like that will sometimes, especially on important articles, will actually have a copy of that article there for you to click on. Again, I've done that in varieties of types of research. It's a useful way to get around the paywall. But we have to move on because we're running out of time, and I just realized this. Wowie zowie. Okay, so we have to talk about structure and all the technical things, how to make this thing work. Structure, 5-minute speech. This is pretty much your standard. It's a standard speech. It'll have 2 or 3 contentions.
It may be that Mr. Harris has frozen out again. Hello? Yeah. Until he gets back, I can take over for him. Oh. Let me see if I can do that. Could I get screen sharing permission so I can take over? Oh, there he is. Hey, Mr. Harris.
Yeah,
Is that giving you troubles?
Yeah. I mean, I'm coming to the end of my life with Zoom, and so it's okay. I'm going to try to pull it up one more time here, just because we want to talk real quickly about technical things. So, Aaron, then we'll just sort of jump out and have you talk. Okay. So we have the basic structure. That's pretty straightforward. To fine tune it, this is the important part. The speeches are not symmetrical. In other words, point A doesn't have to match with point A. Point A con does not have to match with point A pro. They're going in two different directions because they have two different kinds of impacts and frameworks that they're working ahead. That said, you want to make sure that both sides are balanced by impact, by the kind of the quality of research and the number of citations. You don't want to feel it like it's intellectually imbalanced. And there's a question about how do you cite, and this is probably more of a flavor. Debaters will like to give longer quotes. People who come out of extemp give shorter quotes. I tend to be on the short quote. Delivery. We've talked about this at the very beginning. It's a declarative mood, so it's going to be neutral. You don't want to be pushing on it. You don't want to be pushing, but you want to be inviting the listener to consider the two impacts and to have them make the impact calculus. In debate, like I said, we typically in the first rebuttal is when both sides will say, Judge, you should outweigh my calculus or our impacts over their impacts. In pro-con, you give that job to the judge or the listener. And diction is really critical. Your word choice is important. So going over it, you will want to pay attention to exactly what words are you choosing. Even though you don't write it out, you want to be in control of that. On that point, perhaps if you have an orator, they will write the whole speech out, and then you'll have them break it down into a speaking notes that they will speak from. Anyway, okay, that's that. We can talk about that. We got, okay, what can you do? Here we go. Are the technical sides. Unlike,
I think Ms. Harris is frozen again. In that case, I will take over then really quickly. And we'll get through the rest of the slideshow. Sorry, guys. Let me see what I can do. Can everyone see the screen? Quick chat from someone would work. All right, perfect.
just keep talking, Aaron, and then
All right, sounds good, Ms. Harris. We'll make this quick. We're near the end of the slideshow anyways. These are some technical issues that often come up with ProCon Challenge. This year with ProCon Challenge, it's also an asynchronous event. I believe every year it's been offered at the national tournament. It has been online. It's never been judged in person. This year, again, even though the main speech events for the national tournament are in person, like I said, ProCon Challenge still going to be submitted through a video, which means you can control the way that it's recorded and your delivery. If it's a bad take, you can do it again. In that way, you're on camera pretty much, like Mr. Harris has put it here. It's different from an in-person presentation because on camera, it's not casual, right? So if you're in the format that you record a video and you send it in through the online uploading system is a little different than if you have a friend or a competitor, fellow competitor on a FaceTime or a Zoom meeting. Because of that, like I said, you're in control. You should be in control because everything is in that little computer frame like I am here. Your gestures should be smaller because it's confined into the way that people can see you through the camera. Your facial expressions and the eyes play a much bigger role in everything. And obviously, if the first day or the first take doesn't work, practice with it, keep on going with it, and just keep on working with it. Fellow competitors usually have a problem with speaking on camera rather than in person. We've seen that happen here in our state as well when we compete. It just takes practice. There's a barrier, I think, with realizing that the audience doesn't actually see you, but rather the audience sees you through that little lens. Beyond that, competitors in ProCon Challenge should always be making the most of their technology. For cameras, although I recorded mine on a laptop for my national tournament, a cell phone works great, especially if you use the rear-facing camera, which has better quality, well, it's going to be able to shoot you much better than a 720p laptop camera could ever do. It also lets you use better positioning. Most competitors nowadays are on TikTok, as I understand, and most of them have those little camera tripods or stands somewhere that they can angle better for them if they do it online. In person, it's a little different, but if you're online, this technology tips should help a lot. Also be mindful of the room lighting. For me, I stuck a lamp behind my face and I had to stare into a light bulb that was really bright the whole time. Regardless, it helped because I was able to, one, focus on my speech and not look beyond myself, but also because it lit up my entire setting. And so I wasn't looking like a gremlin in Lord of the Rings. Also, in that same sense, sound matters a lot. We're speaking here, not trying to, make some sort of underwater camera quality happen. For me, I prefer using lapel mics when I speak, especially online. And so I use that for the Procon Challenge as well. Using a lapel mic, if possible, is best. For me, I have mine somewhere around me, but it uses a USB transceiver to Bluetooth to my computer. And that basically just helps with the general connectivity. I can step away from my computer, away from any wires, and still have it work. The more discreet your audio setup is, the better as well. With a headset like this, it works. The audio, I'm sure, is fine, but it kind of distracts from the person speaking. And yeah, like Ms. Harris also said here, it creates a better intimacy, a better environment that you're speaking within. Finally, also use notes. Ms. Harris talked about orators generally preferring to write the entire speech out and then having to block it out into manageable chunks that become their speaking notes. For myself, I prefer whenever I speak to use bullet points. I never write my speech out completely because I believe doing so kind of detracts from the more, shall we say, extemporaneous or the impromptu nature of speaking in that way. In my speech for the National Speech and Debate Tournament last year, I put notes and I printed them out physically and put them on a music stand. That allowed me to adjust the height at which I could read it at, and it just basically allowed me to remember the big points I was trying to get at. I'm sure I could have probably also upload my notes somewhere for the others to view for my actual tournament, but my notes itself were pretty bare bones in a lot of ways. It was just basically the points I wanted to make. Sometimes I would bold something, sometimes I would italicize something, and sometimes if I really had to say something, I would write down the entire paragraph I was saying just to make sure I got the words I needed. Generally, avoiding full speeches written is a good idea because it allows the speaker to shine through. And yeah, Ms. Harris, would you like to wrap up on this?
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so this is just the final thoughts. This is my happiness. I think that ProCon is one more interesting events because it has a lot of direct engagement with what we do in public life. And so it's a way that the skills that we build up in ProCon are the same skills that we build that we are going to take over and use with our neighbors in our communities. And it teaches us how to listen and how to be empathetic to one another. And so I think it's marvelous to do that. So there we go. We should ask for questions now. Let's get out of this thing. I think you have the control of the screen, so kill it.
Hi, yeah. So we do have one question already. And before I ask that and give everyone a moment to type more questions, I would just like to say thank you so much, Bill. This has been a very thorough and amazing presentation. I've learned so much about ProCon Challenge. Aaron, thank you for stepping in and just filling in parts and working with Coach Harris on this, but then to step in when he was having technical issues too. That was just wonderful. Thank you. And as a bonus, while we were in our webinar, I messaged our tech team and asked if they had your video of your winning performance from last year, and they sent it to me while we were talking. So they sent me the entire ProCon challenge and they clipped it right to you. So if everyone's interested in that, I could put that in the chat and you can upload that and look at it later, but I will go ahead and send that. Like I said, this is just so you know, this is everyone who participated, and the link goes right to Aaron first. Okay, let's begin with some questions. What other challenges should we anticipate when using policy topics?
I see Mr. Harris has gone offline somehow. I can take that right now. Oh, here, he's back. Mr. Harris, would you like me to take that question really quickly then? The one
Would
in
you
the chat.
repeat it because like I say, I'm you know, the Zoom gods have decided that my time is up. So I'm keeping freezing on this thing. So what's the question? Then I'll let.
No problem, Bill. The question is, what other challenges should we anticipate when using policy topics?
Policy goes really in depth on issues, and so it has a lot of technical information available, and so that interferes with the judge. If the judge isn't ready for the world of policy, it's going to be very easy to overrun them. I think that's really the challenge there. In policy, we like to make there's a kind of a shift up to more to think in terms of critical theory and reacting to it that way. That's a lovely place to play in policy. It is a lot more difficult when you say, "Oh, we're just going to pull a speech coach off the street to listen to you," who comes from, I don't know, Clarkston, Michigan. It's just not. It's going to be more challenging for them, and so you want to be careful about the very technical nature. That's why I say it's a really useful tool. ProCon's really useful for policy people in terms of simplifying what their arguments are, so that they can be more rhetorically connected. But the technical side is just like wow, that's a pistol. Be ready. If you have a student who's doing that, be ready to really work at simplifying.
Thank you. Aaron, did you have anything to add?
Not really, I suppose. I think that really plays into the Q&A question I see over here by Kate.
Go right ahead. Yeah,
Carvalho.
go right ahead.
I'll jump into that with the answer in mind that Mr. Harris just gave about using policy topics. I don't think it's ever a bad idea to think about using a niche topic when addressing in ProCon Challenge. In fact, I think making something like ProCon Challenge conform to something niche means that, well, you come up as more well-learned, more well-researched. A good ProCon Challenge speech delivered means that, well, you're able to balance both sides of the issue, and like Ms. Harris said, be able to show off both sides in a balanced manner. I think in answering that, if there's an advantage in choosing a niche topic, I don't believe so. I think that it's more of how you choose to look at it. With public forum and Lincoln Douglas debate being much more generalized, I mean, you're talking about social media in the United States last year, that's pretty general. It would mean that it's generalized, but not necessarily one approached, myopic in that sense. Whereas choosing a niche topic, with the policy topics or with the congressional dockets, it means that you're choosing to make it more unique. Making it unique isn't necessarily bad or advantageous, just means that the structure of the speech itself changes. I also would say that in that way, competitors that use more unique topics should be considering how to make them more relatable to the average audience member, or appeal to the people that most likely would understand if it's something niche like education within the state of Florida, for example, or somewhere else, perhaps make it generalized into an impact. What does the education in a current state mean for other states, or perhaps for the nation or our society and our generations that are brought up? Making it unique means your impact needs to be a lot more calculated.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was to play with a niche argument, the way you might think about it in terms of surprise. So you pick a niche topic that seems to be fairly narrow, people understand it. And so there are all sorts of congressional debate topics that would really fall into this one. And then the challenge in the pro-con is to take that very kind of niche thing and then pop it open to show how it actually reveals something bigger or more profound about how we think about society. And so that would be the surprise. I mean, I can imagine a fairly technical one like, we'll say, federal support. I was going to look it, but I can't look it up fast enough. Federal support about grain shipments. We could just use that as an example. Seems to be kind of narrow. And then the next thing we do with it is that we explain why this matters, and perhaps grain policy will, on one hand, shift. One side will talk about we need grain policy because that helps the farmers, and that relates to a whole cluster of cultural formation, and then of opposition to that, thinking about a global. Your second main contention is how it illuminates the U.S. relationships to the world. The fun part would be seeing what happens when we take a narrow topic and then bust it open and see where it goes.
Very cool. Thank you both. We have another question here. And thank you so much, Aaron, for jumping in there and getting that Q&A question. How much prep should students anticipate for the rounds from various debate forums like Congressional, World Schools Debate, LD, etc.?
I can start that off. I would say that generally prep for all the different various debate forms, I would think would fall into the general category that whether you like it or not, you would have to do a lot of research anyways. I think coming from a congressional debate background with a little bit of policy in me, I've realized that congressional is a lot, I don't want to say watered down, but less intense than policy usually gets with a topic that you take for the entire school year. In that way, I would describe that congressional topics generally you need to give a little bit more oomph to it when you do research, while policy, well, you would want to scale it back. That little middle ground where you have more than congressional perhaps usually has in research, while having less than policy generally has, means that everything should fall in between. I would say for my speech that I did last year, I would eyeball around maybe 12 to 15 sources for the entire speech, 7 to 8 for each side of the each side, pro and con. Obviously, because it's balanced, it means you should even it out. But if something just really speaks to you or to the competitor, it just means that you put more sources on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key thing about handling that research is that you want to digest it. That until you have you want to have some sort of internal, at least in the beginning, with that reading those long form articles, that you want to know about be able to digest it, to explain it to your parents, explain it to your friends, so that you can start getting, you have a kind of internal sense about what's going on with it. And again, some of that depends just on the student, how long it takes them to do that activity. I don't think there's any kind of, there's no, I don't know of any rule of thumb that I could offer on that one.
Okay, well, thank you. That That was a great answer. You two again, tag teaming it. We've got another question. Not directly related to ProCon Challenge itself, but can students competing in a main event in person compete asynchronously in PCC?
I would assume that this is relating to probably the national tournament, I believe. And unfortunately, here in Michigan, where I compete, I don't believe we've ever offered PCC as an actual event. Unfortunately, ProCon Challenge, the first time I ever was introduced to it was because I went to the national tournament online last year. As I understand it, this year there is a healthy level of competition within the asynchronous categories of the national tournament, as well as in the main speech events that are actually synchronous in Louisville, Kentucky this year. My plan actually this year, again, as I qualified for the national tournament, is to do exactly that. Compete in my main event, extemporaneous speaking, United States extemporaneous speaking, while competing in person with the asynchronous ProCon challenge. I don't remember the exact dates offered, but I do believe that there's an upload deadline for all asynchronous events that you just send in a video and that's your entry for the competition, just like last year. But absolutely, I think main event, you can walk into Louisville, compete, and asynchronously judges would judge you online for the video submission you gave to them probably a week or two in advance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the asynchronous is going to be judged. Asynchronous is judged the previous week, so it's like, gosh, 5 to 12 or something like that, roughly that week, and that's the same time that we're going to be judging middle school, because middle school is going to be asynchronous. Well, it's going to be online, some asynchronous and some in real time.
And if you would like to, I'll put my email address in the chat. If you'd like to follow up with me, I would be happy to take that to my bigger team, which is the event and competition team at NSDA, because we are working on last chance qualifier, which is coming up. We're working on nationals, and I'm actually working on SUPs. So we'll be doing a lot of the online competition work and planning. We're working on it right now. So I would be happy to take that question and look into it a little further for you as well. So let me put my email in the chat. There you go. And I'm going to ask at this time, do we have any more questions for Aaron and Bill? If not, this has been great. Oh, one just came in. What's the best way to stand out in PCC and ProCon Challenge? Great question.
I'll just jump in really quickly then to answer that. Best way to stand out in PCC, I'll be, I suppose this is my little secret, I guess. I was going to take to my grave, but I guess not. Unfortunately, last year for the ProCon Challenge, I did not treat it as importantly as I should have. As a competitor, I could have given it more time, more consideration, more thought. What I did was I am an excellent procrastinator. So the deadline was that week, and I ended up writing my speech the first time and drafting it 2 nights before the deadline was due. And so this is how it goes. But the way to stand out in PCC, I suppose, is to always think of, from my experience at least, and the way I wrote it, was there should be a healthy dose of understanding, but beyond that, delivery, in the sense that treating it less of a really heavily condensed, really dense policy topic and more as a general argument to the public about both sides of an issue. I tried my best not to get bogged down in the details when I spoke for the national tournament last year, and I think that worked out well. I also got a lot of judges' comments back, and some of them really like the debate side of things. I think as a fledgling event, some judges just prefer the more debatey side of the event, while some judges more prefer the public address side of the event. in general, I think there's no right way to answer that question. Doing what feels comfortable and what you can argue passionately, I think stands out above everything else.
Yeah, it's tied in with delivery and how you go about delivery, and how are you able to deliver things casually. And this neutral tone is a really interesting tone to work on. So the danger is that you'll overwrite the speech, and so you'll be too text centered, and when you have a heavy text like that, it takes longer for the speech to sort of begin to flow for you. What I would suggest, playing with is doing a lot more of impromptu or even extemporaneous speaking in the process of developing this, as you're developing the speech, and like in the next 4 weeks. What do you do? These are the kind of exercises that I would recommend going through, just to get used to sort of being able to talk comfortably about things. Aaron. Now we should go back, but we didn't say about the one thing we didn't say about Aaron is that Aaron also is like one of the top extempers in our state. Okay, we'll just put it that way. He is, yeah. You were like first in the novice, and then where did you finish last year?
At state?
Yeah.
I finished third.
Okay. Yeah. So Aaron has this kind of easy flow that comes from doing a lot of extemp, where people don't have that background. Then you'd want to write your speech earlier, and then work at it to loosen it up, and that's going to be more. We're almost moving into a declamation kind of mode, where we have to sort of put on this kind of performative side. Now, again, your interp person who walks in, does this, says, "Oh, yeah, I know how to do that part." The model UN person will come in and know about that style too. So it's learning how to become loose with it's not being casual, but having a kind of verbal looseness about so that you're able to because on that small string, you want to be able to suggest things, just small things. And how do you go about doing that? And if you're too tight, it's going to be more difficult. So that's how I would think about standing out. It's just the practicing of being vocally loose.
So Bill, would you be willing to put your email address in the chat in case anyone wants to follow up with you on verbal looseness?
Oh, sure. Write to me anytime. I always like email. Yeah, I'll use the Gmail one, because that's sort of where my speech and debate stuff comes in the most.
Fantastic. Thank you.
There we go. Yeah. So I always like email. There we go. Bingo.
Thank you very much.
Feel free to contact me. This has been a useful process for me, Kelly, just in terms of pulling all the pieces together that were in my head, and then trying to explain. Yeah, trying to understand, just how good Aaron was.
I know it sounds like, Aaron, you were able to not be in your own head by, kind of preparing at the end, and it worked out very well for you. But like Coach Harris said, you have a lot of other experience that you were able to draw on. And so I don't recommend that other students do that.
No, I don't recommend that either. I suppose the best way I can word it is I had some kind of a platform to work on, and doing it at the last second gave me clarity. But beyond that, I think absolutely what Mr. Harris said is absolutely 100% correct. This kind of work requires a lot of research and a lot of understanding in the first place. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, ProCon Challenge is about being well informed, and that only comes with time and, of course, reading.
Yeah, and it sounds like practice too in some other areas. Well, Unless there are any other questions, I'm just going to say thank you both so much. And everyone who joined us today, thank you.
Thank you.
I've put my email in the chat. If you have any questions about the last chance qualifier, which is coming up, if you have any questions about SUPS, national tournament, if you have questions about Springboard, please get in touch with me. We will be returning with Springboard free online after school scrimmages in the fall. And as a matter of fact, we may be making some tweaks over the summer to make sure that we reach even more people. So if you have anything you'd like to suggest to me, or you'd like to be involved, or want to make sure you know when any webinars or scrimmages or anything is coming up, I would recommend getting in touch with me, but also signing up for one of our newsletters, especially our coach newsletter. And with that, I'm going to say thank you to everyone, and I'm going to end this webinar. Have a great night.
Thank you.